Hello, everyone, and welcome to this NIH Careers Roundtable event. I'm Shannon Wyman, the Scientific Communications Manager at Keystone Symposia, and I'll be your host today. Today, we will explore various opportunities available for scientists in the government sector, from laboratory research to communications. This event is part of Keystone Symposia's mission to help support and train the next generation of scientists to help them pursue and achieve their career goals. Our NIH panelists today are Dr. Rowan Owens, Director of Research, Workforce Development in the Office of Intramural Research, Dr. Kelly Tenhagen, Senior Investigator at the National Institutes of Dental and Craniofacial Research, Dr. Hugo Tejeda, Stadman Principal Investigator at the National Institute of Mental Health, and Dr. Elise Sullivan, Communications Strategist at the NIH. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll begin by having everyone give a brief overview of their career path and current position at the NIH. Let's start with Dr. Owens.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. I was born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. I got my bachelor's degree at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and my PhD in biology at Johns Hopkins University. I first came to NIH as a postdoctoral fellow in the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development in 1985. My first postdoc was so I did a second postdoc in the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, and then things really took off. I was able to move into a tenure track principal investigator position. I was tenured in 1998, and I ran a research group there for about 17 years. And then in 2008, I moved into the Office of Intramural Research, which oversees our approximately 1,000 in-house research groups. My main specialty right now is that I oversee principal investigator recruitment. We have about 30 to 40 principal investigator recruitments from tenure track through senior investigator every year. One of the big things that I run is our Earl Stadman Investigator Search. It's an annual search open to any doctoral level researcher who wants to be a tenure track investigator at NIH. And I'm also very active in our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility and civility activities. And I'll hand it over now to Dr. Kelly Tenhagen.
Oh, you're muted.
I am muted. Hi, I'm Kelly Tenhagen. I was born and raised outside of Niagara Falls, New York. I attended undergrad at Cornell, where initially I thought I wanted to be a vet. And then I changed my mind, and then I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And so in the process of doing the things that you need to do to have a strong med school application, I volunteered one summer in a Drosophila research laboratory at Cornell, and I was completely hooked. So then I ended up doing research my junior and senior year in college, and then applied to graduate school. So I got my PhD at Stanford in genetics, and in the process of being in graduate school, I had my first daughter, and that was amazingly challenging, having a child and trying to do science and research and finish my PhD. So once I finished, we actually moved back east to be closer to family, to have more of a support system. I then took on a research assistant professorship at the University of Rochester, actually working with Larry Tabak, and then moved down to NIH when Larry was recruited as the director of NIDCR. And when I came to the NIH, I actually kind of full circle started working with Drosophila again, going back to my Drosophila roots, and began to develop my own research program. And then applied for a tenure track position, and then was tenured in 2012, and I have been here ever since, running a research laboratory, so I'm a principal investigator, and running a laboratory that studies fundamental protein modifications and how they impact organ function and organ development. And I'm also very active in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility space too. I chair the Women Scientist Advisors Committee here at the NIH. This is a committee that is really tasked with promoting women in science and identifying barriers to women in science. And we've been very active in that space, and I think made quite a bit of progress here at the NIH. And so with that, I will turn that over to Dr. Tejeda.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Hugo Tejeda. I'm a Stadman Principal Investigator at the National Institute of Mental Health. My lab studies the neuronal underpinnings that motivate us and drive emotional behaviors, especially in the face of threats. I've received my undergraduate degree from the University of Texas at El Paso in psychology and biology. When I started undergrad, I thought I wanted to be a college or high school counselor, helping people with difficulties in their life. And I didn't realize there was this whole world of research and science until I started to work in a laboratory there at the University of Texas, El Paso. And that really inspired me to pursue a graduate career, which I did at the University of Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore, where I was also a joint student at the National Institute on Drug Abuse through an individual, what's called Graduate Partnership Program. After obtaining my PhD, I stayed at the National Institute on Drug Abuse in Baltimore as a postdoctoral fellow, where I continue to work on the same topic I've been working on since I was an undergrad, looking at motivation and the neuronal mechanisms that drive motivation. I as a postdoc, worked avidly in the lab and realized that I wanted to continue to try to have my own research group. So I eventually applied to be a principal investigator at the NIH, and I have had a job here for the last 4 years as a principal investigator. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Sullivan.
Good morning. I'm Elise Sullivan. I'm happy to be here today. So my story, I actually was a graduate school colleague of Dr. Tejeda's. So we were getting our PhDs in neuroscience at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. Had a lovely time. And during that time, while Dr. Tejeda was getting more and more sure that he wanted to be a principal investigator, I and others may have said, well, what else in science is there to do that is still making a useful contribution, but may not be at the bench? And so I started in graduate school exploring some other non-bench research opportunities. And upon graduating, I joined a small consulting company in the DC area and started working as a science policy analyst on a number of projects across the government, mostly in the NIH space. And so, I was coming in not really knowing what to expect, and actually found that I really enjoyed project management and working on a variety of NIH projects. And so over the course of several years with that consulting company, I kind of worked my way up and became a project director, and then began actually running a large contract for NIH. And so during that time, I got to know a lot of folks around NIH and working on a number of projects, and then was given the opportunity to actually join as a federal employee maybe about 5 years ago. And I joined the Office of Extramural Research, and that is within the Office of the Director at NIH. And OER is really responsible for the grants infrastructure. So we support all extramural funding across NIH. And we do things like application instructions, funding opportunity announcements, policy implementation. And so at OER, I've been a part of sort of a number of those kind of high visibility, high profile initiatives. So running a series of clinical trial stewardship reform policy changes a couple of years ago that really impacted how NIH funds and sort of does business in clinical trials. We've also been working heavily in the new data management and sharing policy space. So really trying to change the culture of how researchers are thinking about transparency and sharing, and even managing data early on so that it becomes very shareable. So we're very involved in that. And another thing that is really taking a lot of importance here at NIH and within OER specifically is the anti-sexual harassment work, and really treating, trying to create that culture change and trying to create more accountability, and really expecting and now requiring institutions to disclose what is happening at their institutions if there is an allegation or a finding of an unsafe work environment there. So I've been very active in that space, and very much enjoying sort of being at the intersection of policy and implementation and communications across some of these initiatives. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll throw it back to you all.
Great. Well, we have quite a diverse array of career paths and positions here, so I look forward to this discussion. I'll start out with a few questions for discussion as we await the audience questions. The audience can submit questions into the Q&A tab at any time and vote on others' questions you'd like to hear answered. So to start us off, I'm sure many of our audience members are wondering, how does working for the government differ from working in academia or industry? And that can relate to either being a scientist in academia or industry, or being a communications specialist. And anyone who wants to jump in can give it a go.
I'll start.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing about NIH, because we are a government organization, our main interest is what's best for the people of the United States, and by extension, the world, because diseases do not recognize borders. The main differences between our intramural research program and academia are that we have no grant writing or teaching requirements. However, many of our principal investigators do have grants from private foundations, and many have adjunct faculty appointments at universities. I'll stop there.
Yep. Okay.
I'll expand a little bit more. So as a principal investigator, in terms of what it is I do on a daily basis, it in terms of the research, it differs very, very little from a research university setting. So the intramural program is very much like a large university in terms of conducting basic translational clinical research. And again, amazing facilities here, amazing cores, amazing colleagues who are doing almost any type of research that you could imagine on experimental systems. So just an amazing wealth to draw on here. I think what Roland pointed out to the way that we are funded, we don't write grants and then wait for the money and then begin the research. We are actually given money, and then we have retrospective reviews every 4 years to see what it is we did with that money and whether or not we're going to be refunded. And I think the important thing about those kind of retrospective reviews is that it allows you to follow the science. So there are many times when we do experiments where we think something is going to go a certain way and it totally does not, and it leads us in a completely different direction. And these retrospective reviews allow us to follow that biology, to follow that science wherever it is taking us, rather than being kind of tied to specific aims that you wrote 3 years ago that may or may not be germane anymore. And so that gives us enormous amount of latitude to really follow this biology and the science. I think it also creates an environment where, at least in my experience, our colleagues here have been so willing to collaborate, to help, to, you know, get involved in different projects and ideas. I think because, you know, they aren't so consumed with grant writing. You know, they can think about, you know, how this might connect to what they're doing, and kind of think, you know, a little bit more, have more time to think collaboratively. And so that's resulted in amazing collaborations here.
One thing I would like to, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
One thing I would like to add is that is because we don't have to spend a lot of our time writing grants. It also allows us to spend a lot more time in the lab and to know what's happening, and be able to provide a lot more hands-on mentoring for those trainees that might need it. So for me, that's been one of the biggest privileges as well, is to be able to grow alongside of my lab and be kind of in the trenches with them and know what's happening with the science. And that's kind of a fascinating thing for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a big difference not spending a lot of time writing grants, I'm sure. makes it a kind of very different day to day. Dr. Sullivan, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I can bring a little bit of a different perspective from the non-bench research kind of area. You know, in the private sector, I think things are, you know, a little bit, you have to be a little bit hungrier. You have to be a little bit willing to work kind of all, potentially all, you know, all hours of the day around the clock to sort of, you know, meet the needs of your client. And so it is, you know, I found that in the government, while everyone is very dedicated and very hard worker, there are boundaries on sort of your work-life balance, and the boundaries are, in my experience, respected and very much encouraged. And so from that perspective, you know, although everyone is extremely dedicated, the expectations that, you know, you'll clock in, you'll clock out, and that you'll have a life, you know, I think is really upheld from the government standpoint.
Indeed, that does sound vastly different from what I've heard from both academia and industry, to some extent. Dr. Owens, did you have anything else you want to add?
Not on that topic.
Okay, great. So I also wanted to ask, what for you is attractive about working in the government, and what is challenging? So we already kind of covered not having to write grants all the time is pretty attractive. Are there any other benefits that might not be obvious to those who don't work in the government yet? And what do you find maybe more challenging about working for the government? Yeah, go ahead.
This is more of an NIH thing than a government thing, but because NIH has this dual role in providing grants, and we have our own research program in-house, a lot of people come through NIH. So it's a wonderful opportunity to meet a lot of the top scientists. You know, for example, we have one of the best lecture series in the world in biomedical research, our Wednesday afternoon lecture series, which actually is available online to the public. You know, we've had just about every Nobel Prize winner in chemistry or medicine for the past 20 years come through, and our trainees have an opportunity to meet with them. Our research group leaders also have a chance to meet with them. We also get to meet, well, until COVID, we got to meet people who are coming through for grant reviews. And it really is a very intellectually stimulating environment. And I'll stop there.
Dr. Kenhagen, did you have anything to add?
I'll unmute myself. Yeah, I completely agree with what Roland said. I think also kind of in line with that, we have amazing opportunities for people who come here as trainees. So we have a number of different trainee programs. We have an amazing Office of Intramural Training and Education, all kinds of opportunities to meet other people and what they're doing. For instance, in the extramural section in science communications, there are opportunities to do details, to get a feel for different areas of, you know, either grant writing or communication policy. A lot of courses that are available to our trainees, a lot of support for them in terms of well-being, resilience as a scientist, courses in not only in scientific fields and different types of specific scientific techniques, but just, you know, how to apply for grants, mentoring, teaching, leadership. There's just a wealth of opportunities here.
Great. Dr. Tejeda?
I feel like it's hard to add much more on top of what they've already covered, but I feel like the question is kind of what's attractive and what's challenging. And to me, as a scientist, they're one and the same. The challenge is what's attractive. And I think since here at the NIH specifically, we're really pushed to ask ourselves, is the science that you're doing high risk, high reward? Is it something that could be done just anywhere? Or should you be doing the kind of research that can only be done in institutions like the NIH? So to me, that kind of together just adds to the attractiveness of the job, and also the challenge doesn't look so daunting anymore.
Interesting. So you can do higher risk things because it's what you don't have to get funded prior, you get the funding based on what you found after.
And I'll just add one thing to that too.
Uh-huh.
It does actually allow for researchers to really pivot and change their research as there is a public health need. For instance, in this pandemic, there were a lot of labs that did just pivot and began working on things related to the pandemic. And we have the latitude to do that.
Great. And Dr. Sullivan?
So I guess I can comment on something that is a little challenging, working in a place that is sort of so large as NIH. Is, you know, I come from the policy, implementation space, and not only are we trying to get all of NIH to move in one direction, kind of as a team, but we're also trying to get then all of the extramural researchers, all the funded researchers out of the institutions to comply with new policies or new practices, or even just, updated information. And so I think the fact that, we're not small and nimble, we're a very big, bureaucratic organization. And so that can be a challenge in just how we can get things done and how long it takes and how many committees you have to go through and all those steps to take, just because we're a big ship to turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Dr. Adams, go ahead.
Yeah, also like to add, one challenge is that the way that the NIH budget is configured, each institute basically has its own budget. And we allow each institute to have a fair amount of latitude in setting some of its policies, so that, for example, if you're looking for a position at NIH, you may have to go to each individual website for each institute that's of relevance to you to find what you want. We are working, one of the jobs of my office and Dr. Sullivan's office is to sort of unify things across institutes and create bridges between the institutes so that there's more accessibility if somebody is just interested in NIH, as opposed to being interested in working at the Cancer Institute or the Aging Institute or the Dental Institute or mental health. And so the advantage, that actually becomes an advantage because there are multiple opportunities in each institute. So if you're looking for a job in communications, for example, we have a central communications office, but each institute also has a communications office. So if you're a person who really likes communications, but you're interested in mental health, you might either work in the central office or in the NIMH office. If you're into dentistry and you're into science policy, you could either work in the central office or NIDCR. It can be a challenge trying to find things. And if anybody's interested in looking for jobs at NIH, I will offer myself as a resource. I'm the only Roland Owens at NIH, and you can shoot me an email. Just put my name and put Roland Owens NIH into your favorite browser, and I will pop up. And if I don't know the answer to your question, I will point you in the right direction. I'll stop
Great.
there.
Well, thank you so much. That's a great resource for everyone. We are getting some audience questions in now about these training programs and things. One that has come in is, do you host any training programs for international PhD students who are not in the States? And a related question is, are there any internship programs available for foreigners who have an interest in pursuing a PhD in the United States?
So the short answer is yes. So our postdoctoral programs are, nearly all of them are open to foreign nationals and U.S. permanent residents and U.S. citizens. Also, many of our graduate partnership programs are open to foreign scientists. Now, NIH is not a degree granting institution, so the person would have to be in a student in good standing with a graduate school, and then they would identify a collaborator or host lab at NIH. So yeah, we welcome all talented individuals to NIH.
How many partnering organizations do you have for such collaborations?
So it's probably in the hundreds.
Okay.
So we have in the old days, we had formal partnerships with specific universities, and we still have some of those, but what we found works a lot better is having individual graduate partnerships. And that allows a much greater diversity in our graduate students.
So if someone's interested, could they approach you? They're in a PhD program right now. They could approach you about starting up something like that, a collaboration?
Yes, I can point them towards the right person. So if you look at our training website, training.nih.gov, there's a description of our graduate partnerships program, and that's a great place to find out that sort of information. And if anyone has trouble finding the right person to contact, they can email me and I'll connect you with the right person.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I also want to ask about postdoctoral fellowships at the NIH. How would those differ, do you think, than postdoctoral fellowships either in academia, or I know some industry host postdoctoral fellowship programs? Is the training different, or is it just kind of the environment that might be different? And what advice would you have for someone who might be considering doing a postdoc at the NIH?
Yeah, I think I'll start off on this one. And because we're not a degree granting institution, most of our trainees are at the postdoctoral level as opposed to the graduate level. That means that most of our training offices are really configured to handle the needs of postdoctoral fellows. Whereas in a university, they're more focused on the needs of graduate students.
Mm-hmm.
Our Office of Intramural Training and Education, which is our central office, plus the training offices within each of the institutes, are really focused on that transition from postdoc to real job. And as someone who did a postdoc at NIH, I would say there really is no better place to do a postdoctoral fellowship than at the National Institutes of Health. I'll stop there.
Great. Anything from Dr. Kenhagen? Yeah.
Yeah, I can just expand again, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, all the different functions that NIH performs, all of the extramural space, all of the communication space. It actually allows postdocs to potentially do details, or at least, speak and interact with people that are in different areas of science. If they're thinking about a career that might be distinct from, moving on into academia, for instance. So there are a lot of these opportunities to kind of explore what a career might look like in a different area of science. And that has really helped people kind of develop what the next stage in their career path is going to be.
Yeah, a couple other things that I'd like to plug into that. Many institutes have their own transition to independence grants as well, on top of something like the K-99, for instance. So it does kind of open a few doors for some postdoctoral fellows in specific institutes. The other nice thing about doing a postdoc at the NIH, because the PI doesn't have to compete for grants or be as risk averse, it provides opportunities for postdocs to really be able to develop that independence probably a little bit sooner, start to collect data for their own research program while they're still at the NIH that they can then build on when they establish their own lab. So in many ways, it kind of removes some of the conflict that might arise when postdocs in the extramural world might need to have that conversation with their PIs about what's theirs and what are they taking with them.
Great. And for those who may already be in a postdoctoral position but want to transition to NIH, would applying for becoming a PI at the NIH be the next step, or are there other kind of training or integration type programs that postdoctoral fellowship would be appropriate for them to apply for?
Yeah. So as mentioned, we hire about 30 tenure track investigators a year. And if there are and those positions are advertised at our IRP website and at the training website. So IRP for Intramural Research Program.nih.gov, our careers section, we have all of our faculty level openings. And at the training website, we also have a place where we advertise all of our tenure track positions as well as positions around the country. If there is no specific ad, any doctoral level researcher can always apply for our Stabman search. That's our annual search for tenure track investigators in any field relevant to the NIH mission. We usually have applications open in August and closing at the end of September. We plan to do it again this year. We typically hire about 10 to 15 people a year through that mechanism. And I encourage anybody to apply through that. We also have staff scientist and staff clinician type positions. These are for advanced level support persons. Some of our staff scientists work under a particular PI, and others run core facilities for either departments or institutes. So yeah, there are a fair number of opportunities in that area.
Great. And
I will just add, there are many staff scientists that go on then to also apply for tenure track positions too. So there is mobility there too.
Great. We do have another audience question. Do you have any advice for trainees who are looking to pursue a career with the NIH? Anything they can do during their PhD training or postdoc to set them up for success or make them a more attractive candidate when they're looking to join the NIH?
So I'll start the ball rolling on that. So of course, like any other place, we look for people who are doing high quality research and publishing that in peer reviewed journals. we also look for people who have, good scientific judgment and a commitment to mentoring is very important, because, that postdoc to PI transition is like the transition from being a player to a coach. And we want to see some sign that you have the ability to help others be more productive. So, if you've taken an undergraduate under your wing, or summer student, and help them to do something, make sure that goes into your CV when you're applying. We're also interested in people who have a strong commitment to diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility. So if you've done outreach to schools, rural or inner city schools, have you volunteered to do the science fair? Have you participated in community health activities? All that goes in your CV under the mentoring and outreach. And we really do count those things when we're looking for people. Typically for the Stadman search, we'll get between 400 and 800 applicants each year. And 200 or 300 of them every year are perfectly acceptable, highly qualified individuals doing outstanding work. What separates, what can make you stand out from that crowd is having those other activities like the mentoring activities and the outreach activities. And I'll stop there.
Great, that's good to know for sure. Dr. Kenhagen, anything for you if you're looking for someone to join your lab that might stand out?
I will echo a lot of what Roland just said. Also, just in speaking to people, people that are curious, that want to learn, that are interested in knowing how something works, interested in solving problems, interested in asking questions that have never been asked before. I mean, and that's really part of what we're doing. But also interested in working as part of a team. So I tell people, even though everybody in my lab kind of has their own individual project, we're all working together on this because we're doing things, we're asking questions that have never been asked before. We're generating new knowledge. This isn't easy. And so we need everyone's brain power kind of working together to troubleshoot things, to think of new approaches to answering questions, that have never really been answered before. So, you really do want people who are, interactive and want to be part of a team that's really kind of moving the boundaries of science forward.
Great, Dr. Tejeda?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Dr. Owens and Kenhagen mentioned. I think for me, it's kind of important to start the networking process ahead of time as well. Just start reaching out to investigators at the NIH that you're interested in. Let them know that you've read their papers. I think that will kind of showcase that curiosity, that passion, and start to build the case of why you're a good fit for that research group that you're interested in. And then I think if you build that relationship and you get an interview and everything, just kind of showcasing that passion and that need to want to be in a challenging environment and why you think it's important to do this work for the betterment of society.
Great. And Dr. Sullivan, what about someone who might be looking to join the communications team? What can they do to get experience or make themselves look more attractive as a candidate?
Yeah, I think kind of demonstrated experience is really what folks are looking for. Coming from a research background, it is more challenging to get some demonstrable skills in those other areas. So it's not really enough to say I'm a great researcher. I'll probably be great at policy, or I'll probably be a great communicator. So you do need to have some experiences, whether they be internships, kind of side gigs where you're doing some freelance writing. Aaas Fellowships are a really good kind of gateway in, starting as a consultant or a contractor, anything to get that first kind of step, into some of those skills. And then you have those, demonstrable skills on your resume in addition to your science background. And you actually kind of are a proven quantity. So it can be a challenge when you're in it's hard to dedicate time away from your research to expand those skills. But that's really what will get you in the door, is if you you can demonstrate your ability to do some of those things.
Mm-hmm. Does the NIH offer internships for communications or science writing? That I know that you mentioned the Aaas Fellowship as well. If you could tell our audience a little bit about that or any NIH opportunities.
So Aaas has some really great fellowships. I was fortunate enough to be able to do a small science communications internship at my graduate school. I also, through networking, was able to do some freelance writing at the Society for Neuroscience, and got myself in a couple. So that was kind of just hustling and getting yourself out there and saying, I want some opportunities. I don't know. I think once you're in the, and if you're, in the NIH, we had mentioned details and other training opportunities. But to my knowledge, for folks who are not at the NIH, I don't think the NIH has any of those programs, but I might be wrong. It's a big place.
Got it.
Yeah, there is a transitional program for recent graduates that's run out of our human resources department. So if you go to hr.nih.gov and look for students and recent grads, there are transitional internship type positions. They're actually employment positions, but they're temporary employment positions with the potential to be made long-term if a person does well. And there are resources available to hire them long-term.
Fantastic. So I want to kind of take a step back again and ask, I know people kind of have assumptions about working for the government things. What are the biggest misconceptions you think about working for the government or the NIH specifically that you'd like to clear up to the audience?
So I'd say the two biggest misconceptions are that our jobs are only open to US citizens. That's not true. Although many of our administrative positions are restricted to US citizens, most of our research, active research positions are open to foreign nationals and permanent residents. The other thing is that our relationship with industry. So we're not allowed to own, well, we're restricted in the amount of like stock we can own in pharmaceutical companies. We're not allowed to consult for pay with industry, but we can do collaborative efforts. So we have something called a collaborative research and development agreement. So that if one of our scientists discovers something that might be convertible into a product, they can work through the tech transfer office to create a collaboration with an industry partner to help develop that product. One of the recent such products was one of the COVID-19 vaccines. So it actually works. The person, yeah, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's a very famous example.
So I also I'm always amazed when I go to meetings, how many people don't actually understand that the NIH has an intramural research program. So I think that's one of the misconceptions. Everybody knows that NIH is obviously in charge of the extramural funding for universities and grants, but they don't know that we have an intramural program that does basic translational and clinical research. So that's one of the fundamental, I think, misconceptions. And the other is that within that research program, the government dictates what you're working on. you're very confined, and that is not the case. We have an enormous amount of latitude in terms of what we decide to do research on, as long as it, involves understanding basic biological mechanisms, that give us insights into human health and disease.
Great. Dr. Tejeda, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think there's also we don't have to write grants to get our science funded, but many people often do, and Dr. Owens had brought it up earlier. And the same goes for fellows here. They also similarly have many funding opportunities to get that experience, to make sure they're building those skills if they're interested in continuing in the research, or even in the industry world. Industry still has to write grants, and so there's plenty of opportunities like that for trainees here as well.
Great. And Dr. Sullivan, what about in the communications world?
I think generally, some folks may have the idea that government, paper pushers don't really care. And I would say that, I work with a lot of people who are developing developing systems, computer systems, IT tracking, writing blogs, writing application instructions, writing user manuals. Everybody really cares about the mission, and whether, regardless of what your contribution is, if it's making a grant reporting tool easier to use, people are passionate about that and are really taking the user into, and it may not always seem like that because, still applying for a grant and reporting on all that is laborious and a challenging process. But the people on the back end, really are trying to kind of reduce that burden and really think about what is good for science, what is good for applicants, what is good for, the entire state of research. So I think it's, folks really are passionate and they really care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say one last thing. I'd also, a lot of people don't know about the NIH, and it's something we brought up earlier, was that we can train graduate students here as well. And there's many opportunities for graduate training through formal programs that already exist, or even through individual partnerships. So if somebody's already in a PhD program and they're interested in completing a portion of their dissertation at the NIH, it's very much, it's very easy. The process is not that difficult, and I think it's a good experience for many.
Great. We have a question from the audience about science policy. Dr. Sullivan, you mentioned earlier you had done a science policy analyst position. First, I want to know, what does that entail, and what is that like for anyone who might be interested? And someone asked, is training available for international students interested in science policy?
Yeah, so kind of, what does a science policy analyst do? It's a very kind of broad classification. What generally I did is I worked actually across a number of projects that were in the kind of policy space. So they might be figuring out how, the NIH can effectively implement a new policy, and what are all the tentacles that go along with that. So you'd be developing plans and proposals and kind of walking the government through, here's how we recommend you do this, and here's how, we recommend you communicate this way, and here's an idea for a website, sort of kind of, supporting some of that policy work. So I work on a lot of projects that were, hey, we need someone to build out a website on topic X. The government, we've got some people, but we don't have enough. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough support. We're not web designers. So, hey, can you guys help us with setting up, a website for this, or communicating, writing a position paper, a white paper on a certain topic. So it was really kind of spans the gamut on what projects NIH or other agencies kind of needed to get done. So the variety was definitely a lot, which gives you a lot of experience to say, well, I've done a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and so on. And regarding your question about the international training, I'll defer that to somebody else. I don't have an answer for that.
Dr. Owens, do you know of any resources for science policy interests?
Not to my knowledge, for foreign scientists.
Okay.
I can explore that though.
Mhm.
And feel free to follow up with me, shoot me an email, and I'll see if I can identify anything.
Do you know of any for domestic U.S. citizens?
Well, the AAAS Fellowship is a good way. We also have presidential management fellows, but I think that's also limited to U.S. citizens and possibly includes permanent residents, but I'm not sure. Yeah, but most of the training programs for administrators are designed for U.S. citizens.
Got it. Great. Well, as we near the end of our time today, I just kind of want to ask each of you, is there anything we didn't cover that you think our audience should know? Any concluding thoughts? Yeah, anything you'd like to share that we haven't touched on yet? Dr. Owens, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, well, I just want to give a quick review of some of the gateway websites if people are interested in NIH. If you're interested in a postdoc or graduate student type position, check out our training website, training.nih.gov. If you're interested in a principal investigator position, irp.nih.gov. If you're interested in an administrative position, hr.nih.gov. Those are the three key gateway sites. And you're always welcome to look at the main NIH website, nih.gov. That also includes a lot of information about health, just about any information on just about any disease that you want, information for clinicians and for patients, as well as things about science policy and what NIH is doing with the taxpayers' dollars. I'll stop there.
Dr. Kenhagen, anything from you?
I think the one thing that we didn't really specifically mention is the Post-Baccalaureate Program that we have, the training program, which is an amazing program. And so this is for people who have just graduated college, finished their undergrad, and it's a 1 to 3 year program. You apply directly through the NIH Intramural Office of Education and Training website. And it's an amazing program for people to come and immerse themselves in a research environment. I've had a huge number of postbacs come through the lab. It also allows people to kind of figure out what it is they want to do for the next step. So I've had a lot of people come in very sure they were applying to medical school and then change their minds, and other people coming in very sure they were going to apply to graduate school and then completely change their minds. And so it's a great program to just kind of immerse yourself, as well as taking advantage of all of the different exposure and training opportunities here at the NIH.
Great, that's definitely very helpful for our audience. Dr. Tejeda?
Yeah, I think there's the NIH has everything you may want out of a training environment, and it's really conducive for pivoting and exploring alternate careers from the one you might have initially embarked on. The one thing I would add is, irrespective of what career at the NIH interests you, it's going to be important for you to network and to reach out and start to build connections with people in those different offices or research labs. That way you can set yourself apart from the rest of the applicants. I can't emphasize that enough. I think that will pay off in the long run. And then NIH is a great place to work.
Great. And Dr. Owens, yeah?
Yeah, actually, there is one other thing I wanted to mention. We are, putting our money where our mouth is with regards to diversity and inclusion. We started a program a few years ago called the Distinguished Scholars Program, and Ugo's a part of that program. It basically provides incentives for institutes to hire talented principal investigators who have a commitment to diversity and inclusion, equity, and accessibility. So you have to be selected first for a PI position, and then that makes you eligible. And then the institute puts in an application on your behalf, and that's where we look for those mentoring activities that involve underrepresented groups and outreach and things like that. And we pick about 10 to 15 people a year, and there are central startup funds which go to the institute. But in addition, the participants have special mentoring and networking opportunities. And when I say special, I mean special. So it's like dinner with the NIH director and other institute directors, as well as small group mentoring with people like, one of the people who helped develop the HPV vaccine. So these are like really senior people who are outstanding scientists, and it's just a wonderful program, and it's really been inspirational seeing some of the people who come through that program. And we're sort of we're working on two hypotheses. One, that we can fill every position with an outstanding, talented person who also has a commitment to diversity and inclusion. The second hypothesis is that the talents that it takes to be a good person, to manage a diverse group, that's the same skill it takes to manage a multidisciplinary research portfolio or collaboration. And that's where we're headed in the science, where you need to have a clinician working with a computational scientist, working with a microbiologist, who can all work together to do something huge. And I'll stop there.
Fantastic. And Dr. Sullivan, any concluding thoughts from you?
I think in addition to, I think I spoke about sort of policy and communications, a number of ex-scientists, previous bench researchers, are very interested in sort of program administration roles. So that's, like being a scientific program officer or a program director or a scientific review officer. So those are in that same space where you're not doing the research, but you might be kind of helping direct it, helping make sure that peer review is appropriate. So they're really important jobs, and they're all done by folks with science and research backgrounds. So just, and there's a big swath of opportunity in that space as well.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for all these insights and the advice for our audience. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, but I'd really like to thank you for your time, and in particular, Dr. Owens, for helping to organize the very informative panel. Our audience can find more free BKS events and recordings on our homepage at virtual.keystonesymposia.org, and other career development resources on the KeyPoint blog, including links to these NIH career resources, which we'll be adding as well. So thank you all for attending today, and we hope you'll join us at another virtual or in-person event soon. Good luck with your career goals.